Welcome back, everyone. Attorney Craig Steger here, practicing in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Today, I want to talk about a $50 million verdict for spilled coffee that came out within the last couple of weeks out in California against Starbucks. So, before I get to that $50 million verdict, I want to talk a little bit about the McDonald's case because this is being compared or referred to as the second McDonald's case. So, most of you have probably heard about the McDonald's case. It's often used in a pejorative sense in terms of um, evidence of runaway juries and frivolous lawsuits and things like that. But actually, the facts of the McDonald's case are much more disturbing from the standpoint of McDonald's than you might think if you never really heard anything about the case. Let me tell you about the McDonald's case a little bit. So the McDonald's case was a verdict that came out, I think it was in 1994, and it involved a 79-year-old woman who had hot coffee spill in her lap and caused some pretty severe burns. And the theory in that case was that McDonald's made the temperature of the coffee unreasonably hot for no good reason. And maybe there was some business reason for having it hot, but it was very hot coffee. And this woman went through the drive-through, I believe, and spilled the coffee in her lap and had bad burns to sort of her midsection and required skin grafts and was in the hospital for a period of time recovering from that. So pretty horrific injuries. And what people often don't know about the McDonald's case is in that verdict, seems kind of small now. That was a $2.7 million punitive damage verdict, which was sort of earth-shattering at the time for that type of case. And it was kind of the first, I think, nuclear verdict, if you will. But $2.7 million isn't actually a lot, especially when we're going to talk about a $50 million verdict. How many years later? Is that 30 years later? But let me tell you about the history of that case and how they got to a $2.7 million verdict, which incidentally was reduced by the judge to $480,000. So even though the jury awarded a verdict of $2.7 million on the punitive damages, the judge lowered that to $480,000, I think based on some state rule that the punitive damages couldn't be more than 3 times the compensatory damages. So things like pain and suffering, medical expenses, lost earnings, things like that. So it was reduced, and I believe later settled out of court for an undisclosed amount of money, which isn't unusual if there are appeals pending or being threatened and things like that. She originally approached McDonald's, and I'm not sure if she had an attorney at that point in time, but all she wanted was $20,000. She wanted $20,000, which basically would have just covered her medical expenses for her burns and her skin grafts and all that. $20,000. And you know how much McDonald's offered her? $800. Apparently, that's according to Wikipedia. There's a whole Wikipedia page on it. So McDonald's rejected her $20,000 and offered her $800. She then went ahead and hired an attorney, and they worked up the case. And during the case, the attorneys demanded $300,000, which probably seemed like a lot of money at the time. But when you look at the verdict, again, McDonald's apparently rejected that. So McDonald's had numerous opportunities before trial, before that verdict, to settle for much less, especially for the $20,000 she was initially demanding. So when you see these big verdicts come out, realize that there's a very high likelihood that the insurance company or corporation or whoever's being sued had multiple opportunities prior to that to settle for a lot less, or at least less than the verdict, okay? So that was the history of the McDonald's case, and it sort of has been it's part of our culture now, the McDonald's case. But that's the real history of the McDonald's case. So let's talk about the Starbucks case, the $50 million Starbucks case, which has some similarities, although some differences that I'll get to here in a moment. So The Starbucks case involved I think a delivery driver, not necessarily a DoorDash, but one of these services that actually delivers for other people. So a gentleman was a delivery driver and had gone through the drive-through window, and I think there was an order for like 3 hot teas that weren't for him. And it comes in these little cardboard cup holders that you've probably seen before. And based on the video, you can tell that the person that put it in there did not get one of them down seated correctly. It was kind of just sitting on top. And after it had been transferred him in the car, it spilled in his lap, and he sustained serious burn injuries to his genitals. And that was the source of that claim. That was the nature of his injuries. And so in that case, he hired, or at least some point at the time, Nick Rowley, who's a pretty famous trial attorney around the country, has gotten some enormous verdict, has been involved in some of the verdicts against Monsanto, and successfully sued Tesla recently. So very, very prominent trial attorney out in California got involved in that case. And they actually bifurcated the case. Well, what does that mean? They actually had 2 trials, I think, in front of the same jury. So the first trial was just the question about liability. And after that trial, the jury found that Starbucks was liable. So then they had a second trial right after it to assess damages. And the jury awarded $50 million in that case, which I think the plaintiffs were asking for more. According to Mr. Rowley, his client, so the plaintiff in that case, had been willing to settle for $30 million in exchange for an apology from Starbucks and a promise by Starbucks to change their internal policies. I don't know if there was ever a chance to settle for less than $30 million. What I know of Nick Rowley tells me that they probably didn't get a chance to settle for $20,000 like in the McDonald's case. But according to him, they were willing to take $30 million in exchange for an apology and a change of policy. And Starbucks refused and ended up with a $50 million verdict against them, which I'm assuming is going to be appealed or is in the process of appeal. But if it sticks, that's a chunk of change. So that is the Starbucks case, the second McDonald's case. We'll see if it sticks or not, but it made the news, and I thought people might find that interesting. If you have any questions about either of those trials, either of those verdicts, let me know in the comments. Like I said, there's a whole Wikipedia page devoted to the McDonald's case, and there's been some pretty good documentaries done after the fact talking about the plaintiff in that case and what really went into that verdict. I suspect there will be something similar with the Starbucks case. Maybe that'll be a term that'll replace the McDonald's case, but the Starbucks case. So we'll want to pay attention to that one. If people have any questions about any of that, feel free to leave a comment below. If you have a specific legal question, I would ask that you just reach out to me by email as opposed to putting it in the comment or in the chat. So I hope you found that helpful. And yeah, so until next time, everyone, have a good one.